And joining us today to tell us more about that, we have former Senate President Franklin Drilon, a veteran lawmaker and legal expert who has long championed reforms in government accountability and anti-corruption. Magandang umaga po sa inyo. Welcome to Morning Matters.
Good morning, Gretchen. Thank you for having me this morning.
Okay, una-una ho, sa hearing kahapon, you said that the ICI as a body is constitutionally doubtful. What do you mean by that?
Well, okay. First, let me be clear, Gretchen. I am in favor of the ICI because of the massive corruption that we see today in our midst. It is important to emphasize this because under our Constitution, it is the Ombudsman who has primary jurisdiction over anomalies committed in government. But it doesn't mean that we cannot create bodies like the ICI, but they must only be a fact-finding body because the matter of the investigation or preliminary investigation can be done only by the Ombudsman. The filing of cases in the Sandigan can be done only by the Ombudsman. But there is nothing in the Constitution and the laws which would prohibit the creation of the ICI in order to do fact-finding, recommend the filing of charges against those who, on the basis of evidence, may have committed infractions. So this is that is why I said let us have a sunset clause so that the ICI will exist only until these corruption issues are resolved and until we are able to restore our people's faith in our democracy and our watchdogs effectively. Right now, what I'm saying is that we should start strengthening the Ombudsman's office, the office of the Ombudsman and also the COA. These are our watchdog agencies. We cannot keep on creating one body after the other without regard to the size of the bureaucracy. In other words, I am in favor of adding people to the Ombudsman's office, adding courts to the Sandigan, in order that we can have a faster resolution of this mess that we find ourselves in today. What is important in my mind is that we must restore our people's faith in our democratic system, in our institutions of democracy. Right now, it is totally eroded because of the involvement of members of Congress in this mess that we are in today.
Senator, if it were to be a fact-finding commission, wouldn't it be difficult to do its job if it did not have broad powers? Given the extent and scale of the corruption we're seeing, that it leads to the higher echelons of power, paano po kaya sila sisiputin na unang-una nitong mga iniimbestigahan nila kung hindi sila, kumbaga hindi mo sila bibigyan ng kapangyarihan din? And what I mean, you already mentioned fact-finding commissions in the past, Feliciano and David commissions, and they were never given the power to prosecute. How did that turn out?
Well, Gretchen, we are bound by our Constitution. Our Constitution says the power to conduct preliminary investigation, the power to prosecute is in the Ombudsman. We can create bodies to substitute the Ombudsman by law. Our Constitution is supreme. That is the reason why our choices are limited to what the Constitution says. And that is why my proposal is to strengthen this institution of the Ombudsman under our Constitution and not and give the ICI a fixed term and a sunset clause, because we cannot have perpetually a duplication of functions. There can be duplication of functions now because what our public needs right now to restore the confidence of the public in our institutions of democracy. I repeat, we could not perpetuate a duplication. If we want really to, if that is the desire, let us amend our constitution. But as long as we live by our constitution, we have no choice except to strengthen the Ombudsman as the body that exacts accountability from public officials.
So if it were to exist as a fact-finding body, what should be within its scope?
Well, the scope right now is to look at anomalies in the infrastructure program of the government. In other words, not all anomalies are being considered under the ICI. Only infrastructure programs. For example, just to clarify, for example, if there was another family, this cannot be entertained by this ICI. It has to go to the Ombudsman. Because, as I said, the Ombudsman is a constitutional body created to exact accountability. And our response to the public clamor today is try to have this committee or this ICI in order to assist in gathering evidence and recommend to the Ombudsman or to the COA certain measures that must be taken. And this is because we have a constitution. If we want to revise this, let us revise our constitution.
Should it at least have the power to subpoena witnesses and hold them in contempt para po mapapunta po nila itong mga tinatawag po nila?
The power of subpoena with the power to subpoena witnesses and documents is not an issue. They can have that. My problem, Gretchen, is when you hold in contempt somebody for refusing to turn over the documents, especially when they invoke the right against self-incrimination. Remember that in this particular case, this investigation will lead to filing of cases. So that unlike the hearings in Congress, where you can hold in contempt a witness who refuses to answer, you cannot do so in the case of the ICI because the right against self-incrimination is guaranteed against our Bill of Rights. To demonstrate, Gretchen, if you will compel a witness to testify against his claims against self-incrimination, you are saying that I will hold you in detention until you testify against yourself. That is not acceptable. And there, yes, the right of the power to contempt should be given, but this the power to hold somebody in contempt to comply with the orders of the ICI must be viewed in the light of the invocation of the right against self-incrimination under our Constitution.
I guess one of the concerns of people is when you leave it to the Office of the Ombudsman, then it also is already not within public view. Unlike, we've seen the effectivity of the congressional hearings, the Senate hearings, in pushing forward the agenda of pursuing accountability. Kasi pag hindi po nakikita ng taong bayan kung ano po nangyayari, katulad nga po yung sa ICI na ngayon magla-live stream na ho sila, there is a danger of this just being forgotten, and it might end with that sunset clause that you mentioned.
Gretchen, what you are expressing is precisely a question of trust and confidence. Today, we have no trust on our institutions because of what has happened. Having said that, there is nothing wrong with including in the law the requirement that the Ombudsman should live stream their proceedings because that is right to information. Subject to reasonable standards, we can require by law the Ombudsman to live stream his proceeding. So That there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. Only my concern is you cannot remove the ombudsman in the process of exacting accountability, because that is our system under the Constitution. If we want to change that, let us change our Constitution.
I guess because for many years we haven't heard much from the Office of the Ombudsman. They haven't really been as transparent to the public, no. So that is one of the challenges for the current office. But when it comes to this Senate bill on Infrastructure Anomalies Investigation Act of 2025 or 1215. What do you make of that Independent People's Commission? Do you see that as different from the ICI, or is it just a difference of being legislated?
Well, no, there is a difference. For example, I think there is a consensus that they must have security of tenure. I mean, those who in the ICI now must have security of tenure so that they can be independent in their judgment. Second, there is a proposal that they be given fiscal independence, meaning they do not have to request for funds, but what is appropriated is automatically released. But most important, the law will give permanence to the office without the danger of the same being abolished by effective.
So you are in favor of an Independent People's Commission?
Sorry?
So you are in favor of an Independent People's Commission?
I am in favor of an independent People's Commission. I said that yesterday in the hearing. I am in favor because of the environment today, where the corruption is so massive that I have never seen this, Gretchen, in my 34 years in government, the kind of corruption that we see today. So we must, we must show to the people that we are capable of addressing this, and the mechanism of the ICI is one way of doing it. But on a longer term basis, I push for the strengthening of institutions, the Ombudsman in particular.
Correct.
Buy them more funds, provide them more personnel, and I keep on reading in media that the present Ombudsman has expressed concerns over the appointments done by the previous Ombudsman.
About 200.
So again, Gretchen, the office is only as good as the appointee that you make under that office.
Okay, but what would be the difference of that Independent People's Commission with the ICI in terms of powers? Ito po ba, tingin nyo dapat fact-finding lang din?
Well, whatever powers we grant to the ICI or to its successor must be within the framework of our Constitution. That's all I'm saying. I repeat, whatever powers we give to the ICI must be within the framework of the Constitution. Example, Gretchen, we cannot authorize the ICI to prosecute cases before the Sandiganbayan. Every lawyer will tell you that. We cannot grant that power to prosecute. We cannot grant the power to contempt in case the witness will say, I invoke my right against self-incrimination. Because because if you set that aside, the ICI can deprive a person of liberty for not saying that I am guilty. So these are things which we must learn. Unfortunately, we have this for order in society, but I also lay the blame on the appointments made, because I will repeat, an institution can only be as good as the people who runs it. No matter what we do, if the appointing authority appoints a bum or a crook in any position, no matter how good the structure is, the system will collapse.
Which leads me to the question of why not have another body nga po, no, to serve as checks and balances for the office of the Ombudsman? Because if it is dependent and it is only as good as its appointees, then you risk having another, 6 years or more, or 7 years rather, na hindi po naiimbestigahan ito. And as we say, justice delayed is justice denied. Why give such or leave such a huge responsibility to only one office?
Well, Gretchen, I ask you back, who will, under that theory, you must have a supervisor over the supervisor, the ombudsman, and so forth and so on. Wala na pong katapusan yan. There are remedies available, as in, for example, for the ombudsman, he is subject to impeachment. In fact, there were cases in the past where the ombudsman was threatened with impeachment, and this is a remedy provided under our constitution. We cannot just put supervisory bodies over everybody because there will be no end to it. And our leaders are politically responsible if they make errors or errors in judgment, like appointing a crook in the office of the ombudsman. Then he or she is responsible for that, and can be subject to impeachment, for example.
Correct.
Or they can be booted out of office in the next election.
However, impeachment is also a political exercise that goes through the House. Kaya medyo mahirap po yan, lalo-lalo na kung sila po yung nakataya. But another question, you have said this time and time again, you have never seen corruption of this magnitude in 34 years that you've been in public service. Why? What was the level of corruption that you saw back in your time? Ano po ba yung, syempre may comparison po yan kung ganito po ay nakakabahala na. Ano ba yung dati?
Chen, the most recent is formally. But it is bad. Formally was bad. But in this particular case, in the particular case of the infrastructure best, it would appear like Congress or members of Congress are involved. And the extent is that it is almost nationwide in terms of the corrupt practices. There were anomalies in the past. As I said, formally is the most recent. You recall the North Rail issue, recall the ZTE issue, you recall the PDAF issue. This doesn't compare to what
In
we see
terms of
today.
amount? In terms of amount?
In terms of amounts. And in terms of number of people involved or suspected to be involved.
But hasn't this been in place for a long time? I mean, corruption within the DPWH, within our agencies. And during your time as Senate President, wala po ba itong BICAM at yung small committee?
Well, there are, but Gretchen, that brings to mind the culture of impunity that we see today. People are no longer afraid of violating the law because they feel that nobody gets punished anyway. So they will steal money from the government and get away with it. And that's what I call the culture of impunity. And how did this come about? To me, it came about because of the lack of respect for the rule of law. Hindi na po takot na makulong, kaya po nagnanakaw na lang. So this is one of the things which we must reform.
The BICAM is only supposed to reconcile the House and the Senate versions. Meron po ba tayong batas that restricts the role of the BICAM to only that function, or does it really have broad powers to be able to make sweeping changes and magkaroon po ng mga insertions coming from nowhere?
This has already been decided by the Supreme Court. The BICAM can propose new items. Gretchen, just to clarify, an insertion is an amendment. It is called
correct.
an amendment in ordinary legislation. In the national budget, it's called an insertion, which has acquired such a bad name. But at bottom, these are both amendments. To say that the BICAM cannot in the process of reconciling, cannot decide on new items is a limitation on the plenary power of the members of the representatives of the people to enact laws. And the Supreme Court, let me emphasize, has already ruled that the powers of the bicameral conference committee is plenary. They can propose new items in reconciliation of the differences between the House and the Senate version.
And going to the amendments that were done in the past budgets, yung ilan sa mga question po doon, yung unprogrammed appropriations, pati yung paglilipat ng mga budget from the, I think, the Department of Education and Health going to the DPWH, mas malaki po yung budget noon. If you compare the amendments done during your time and this time, would you call it also egregious?
The amendments today, and the amendments that were proposed in the past, you would consider as petty cash if you look at the extent of the insertion that we see today. The corruption is massive, and it involves massive participation by the Congress and certain members in the executive branch. Hindi naman po pwede na Kongreso lang ito because in our system, the power to authorize expenditure is in Congress, but the power to release the funds is in the President upon the recommendation of the Department of Budget and Management. So, I repeat, the power to authorize is with Congress, but the power to disburse is with the executive. Even if we do all kinds of authorizations in Congress, if the executive will not release, there is nothing you can do because that is part of our system, and therefore the remedies are: you impeach the president, you file charges against the congressmen and the senators, and you must have the agency that will exact compliance strengthened and independent.
But so the executive is accountable if we follow that train of thought. Dito po sa sa BICAM, how is it possible that nakalusot po yung budget with the House Speaker saying wala daw siya sa BICAM? Hindi po ba dapat pirmado po ng lahat ng leaders ng House at ng Senate po yan? How does the BICAM really work? Because if nakakalusot po na hindi lang umatin o hindi pumirma, paano po pumapasa po yun? Ilang tao lang po ba yung dapat pumirma doon?
Gretchen, ang budget literally is about 6 inches high. Thousands of entries. I don't know, 25, 40,000 entries. It is simply impossible for the members of Congress to go over it line by line. But it doesn't mean that there is no check and balance. The Department of Budget and Management knows this budget from birth. In other words, at the start of the conceptualization of the budget, alam po ng DBM yan. When the Congress authorizes expenditure of the funds and inserts expenditures which are not in the original President's budget, alam po ng DBM yan. After the BICAM report is submitted, both chambers have the right to disapprove the BICAM report. After the BICAM report is approved and General Appropriations Bill, the President has the right to exercise line item veto, meaning that the President can veto items of appropriation which are not consistent with its national policy or which is tainted with corruption. So there are checks and balance all over the place. It's just the failure of the people manning the system that this system has failed.
checks and balances that have not worked and have allowed these kinds of budgets to pass. Finally, what do you make of this proposal by former Associate Justice Adolf Ascuna to have some sort of a writ of quitam, where a private person can sue on behalf of government for violations, acting as a whistleblower of some sorts, and speaking on fraud committed by companies and individuals. I mean, yung writ of quitam kasi allows an ordinary person to be a whistleblower and to somehow get a reward after. Strengthening what people can do. Because sa ngayon, ano po ba yung nagiging proseso? Is this all but left to government to handle? What is within the power of the people here, ordinary citizen?
Well, firstly, I respect my good friend Justice Adolf Ascuna. Unfortunately, I have not read in detail what he proposes, and therefore, but in general, in as a general concept, people should have the right to raise these anomalous transactions in complaints before the Ombudsman and in the courts. In fact, one of the proposals in this ICI charter pending in the Senate is that you must exempt from liability the people who would work on exposing these anomalies because of the danger of the disincentive if one is sued for abuse of authority by those you charge, you are helpless. So one of the proposals is to strengthen the process is to exempt the members of the commission from liability for actions that they have done. Gretchen, I can talk out of personal experience. When I was assisting President Aquino during the coup d'etats and filing cases as Secretary of Justice, I was sued for damages for abuse of authority. So there is really a need to protect our whistleblowers, our officials, exactly accountability for frivolous suits. The members of the monetary board faces a lot of cases because of the closure of a bank for abuse of authority. That is why in the charter of Banco Central, the members of the monetary board are shielded from such cases. So there are ways of doing it. But I repeat, at bottom, Gretchen, it is the people who would man the system to make the system workable. If you appoint a crook, you will have a crooked system.
We hope to make government more efficient and effective in its role and not just to add layers of bureaucracy, but also at the same time, we hope to somehow make the system a lot better. And we hope to find solutions for that in the meantime. Maraming salamat po sa inyo for your time today and for weighing in on with us here at Morning Matters. We have former Senate President Franklin Drilon.
Thank you, Gretchen.